Recently, the union government has announced its annual licensing policy for the opium cultivators in the country, and absolutely it becomes important from the examination point of view, not just to know about the recent policy, but also to understand about the opium as a whole, as what it is, and also talking about its cultivation. You have to know the various or the very basic aspects of the opium cultivation in India, and also all the rules and regulations or all the acts or the laws governing this particular topic. So welcome back to Believers IAS Academy. This is Madan Gopal, and in this today's particular video, let's study about opium, and also we will in the end try and solve one prelims question. So without any further ado, let's begin. So what is opium? So opium is amongst one of the oldest known medicinal property or a medicinal plant which is used for medicinal and psychoactive substances. Of course, it was not originally formed or known as a medicinal plant, but owing to its medicinal characteristics, right now it is regulated. The cultivation of opium around the world is not banned completely, but it is regulated because of its medicinal properties, which we will study in this particular video. And as a whole, opium is a plant which is famously known for its medicinal and also psychoactive substances. So it was derived from the opium poppy plant, which is also called as the papaver and somniferum. Of course, not important, but it is good to know. And in India, the cultivation of this opium, as we discussed, is not banned, but it is regulated under the NDPS Act 1985. Very important act, which is NDPS, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. Very important. 1985. So this is that act which empowers the central government to create laws or regulate the production or the usage or anything and everything related to opium in the country, right? So what is opium? Or let's say we will try and simply understand what opium is. As we discussed, it is a psychoactive and also a kind of a plant which has both medicinal and psychoactive substances, and it is derived from a plant which is famously called as the poppy plant. So talking about its source, right? It is from the poppy plant, and the form as and how we derive this opium is through a latex, a milky latex gel kind of a substance that oozes out from this poppy plant bud, which later gets utilized. In fact, there is a process. How do they do it? To even explain more in detail, farmers, especially the regulated farmers who are especially given that permit by the central government, they grow or they get into the cultivation of this poppy plant, and they select the matured poppy buds once after the cultivation grows for a particular point of time. And once they find out the matured poppy buds, they do a small incision, a shallow cut on the bud of the poppy plant. So now if you have observed what poppy plant is, yes, so this is how the poppy plant looks like. So once the poppy plant is fully matured, the farmers select a particular poppy bud and they do small incisions, a shallow depth on these poppy buds, which from this further the latex or a milky gel kind of a gelatin pops out, oozes out, which then is dried. So after this incisions are made, the poppy, the milky latex that comes out, it further is dried up, and this dried content is what is called as the opium, which undergoes few scientific or let's say few processes under the research, or let's say in a particular plant where this production happens, it undergoes further processes and then it becomes, or this is the way how we get the opium. We're talking about the usage of this opium, right? So it is basically used in variety of areas. We use it basically even in the food industries, right? Especially in bakeries, sweets, and even the poppy seed oil is used, is in fact is an edible oil in certain parts of the country, and also it is used in medicines, right? So that is also very important. So now talking about the poppy plant, as to what makes it so unique is because of its alkaloid nature. So what is alkaloid? It is those substances in which nitrogen compound is organically available, right? So this, we have three different types of alkaloids, right, which is derived from the opium plant, or the opium. One is the morphine, we have theobromine, and then we also have codeine, right? Some of the predominantly or the major popular opium types. So the morphine, it is the one which usually gets used as a muscle, or let's say pain reliever, pain depressant, right? Or also called as analgesics. So morphine gets used as an analgesic, and also codeine gets used in the manufacturing of cough syrups, right? So it has varied applications, right? So this is basic about what opium is. It is derived from the poppy plant in the form of milky latex gel, which later is dried up, and it is then further derived as, or let's say this dried latex gel is further brought down to for the making of opium, and this has variety of utilities, and in fact uses both in medicinal field and also in various other field, especially in the medicinal region or the medicinal aspect. Because of its alkaloid nature, it forms three different important one: morphine, codeine, right? And in fact morphine is the famous pain relieving drug. In fact gets used for cancer patients also, right? It works as an analgesic. And then codeine is another form of opium, which is an alkaloid, which is used in various cough syrups, right? So this much if you know, it's sufficient to further proceed. Now let's come back. What is an opium? A latex gel obtained by lancing opium poppy capsules. Lancing is basically making dissections, right? A small shallow cuts. Contains powerful alkaloids like morphine, which is a painkiller in surgeries and palliative care; codeine, which gets used in cough syrups; and then theobromine, a raw material for many semi-synthetic drugs, and also grown for seeds used in foods, as we discussed, and also seeds oil, right? So this is the basic information about what opium is. Now talking about its medicinal importance, it is an essential important medicine for pain management, especially morphine and the codeine that we discussed. It plays an important role in treating or in helping cancer patients, and also post-surgical care. And talking about the adverse effects, of course this goes unsaid, or let's say not to mention, but this is pretty much evident as to the adverse impacts of the opium. One is the addiction risk. Prolonged use can lead to dependence, right? And also it has very serious health effects as well. Some of the known side effects are the drowsiness, constipation, respiratory depression, right? And also it creates social issues, a very important reason why the production of opium is completely regulated, right? But there can be a question, it can be banned, but owing to its medicinal properties, it is not banned, but it is regulated. So what are the social issues that it causes? Illegal trafficking, illegal trafficking of fuels, crime, and smuggling, right? Considering the all the psychotropic benefits, or the psychotropic substantive material that this opium has. So it can be mostly used as an illegal material to be transporting between countries, right? And you know how this works, right? And also anyone who is administered with an overdose, that is also very fatal, and without proper medical intervention the person can even die. So the adverse effects is actually more than the good things with respect to how this opium can be used, provided it is regulated, right? So, talking about the international standing, India is the only country allowed by the UNSCND, which is the United Nations Single Convention for the Narcotic Drugs. So this is also very important. United Nations Single Convention for Narcotic Drugs, which was adopted in 1961, right? In fact, when studying the history of the opium was from a very long time, the usage. In fact, it goes back to the Mesopotamia, where references have made for the same opium even as jolly plant, right, or joy plant. It is even called as joy plant, and even in the British era, the opium trade was highly regulated. In fact, one of the instances was the opium trade war between the Britishers and the China, which we study in the modern history, right? So, and dating back to the present age, with respect to the world, it is regulated under UNSCND, which is United Nations Single Convention of Narcotic Drugs, 1961, right? And another exceptional point under this to keep in mind, that or let's say amongst this particular or let's say inside this particular convention, India is the only country who has the right to produce gum opium, right? Of course, 11 other nations grow poppy, but extract, or let's say to extract the gel or the gum that we discussed, the right, or let's say India is the only country to have the right to produce the gum opium, whereas the 11 other nations grow poppy, they just grow, but the extraction only happens from India in terms of the gum, right? So that is also very important. And moving forward, what is the legal framework in India? So under the government, we have, let's say, in India, we have the NDPS, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act 1985, which regulates and creates NDPS rules. In fact, it gives the power to the central government, which creates rules and regulations for the entire country, and accordingly, cultivation only for medicinal and scientific is what been delineated by the central government under the NDPS, that it has properly put boundaries in terms of who cultivates and what is the purpose why we cultivate opium, let's say, for example, only for medicinal and scientific use. And also another important thing is who should cultivate, and also the person who cultivates it is under the licensing rule, where annual licensing policy is implemented, where on an annual basis the farmer who is cultivating opium has to renew his policy, his agreement, right, his license. So annual licensing policy announced by the central government is also one important thing to regulate and control, and to make sure that illegal cultivation or trade of this particular opium doesn't happen. Moving forward, as we discussed, where does it happen? So now we discussed what are the different rules that governs India in terms of how opium is cultivated. Now, who cultivates it? It is permitted and notified tracts, and who notifies it? It is the central government. And these are the few areas, especially Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. And in order to cultivate, as we discussed, farmers need licensing, and this licensing is obtained from the Central Bureau of Narcotics, CBN. Central Bureau of Narcotics, very important, right? So this is the one that issues license or renews license, and in fact, farmers, after the cultivation is all done, they have to declare the total amount of cultivation that they did in terms of the opium production to the Central Bureau of Narcotics, which further decides the rate at which this particular the cultivation or the entire batch has to be sold, right? So two different things, two important things. One is NDPS Act, which empowers the central government to make or create rules and regulations in the country, and CBN, Central Bureau of Narcotics, which undertakes, or which is the sole body that ensures to give licenses to the farmers, and also it is the one which also takes care of all the producers that the farmers have produced, and it is the body to which farmers have to completely declare how much they have produced, right? So these are also very important. Moving forward, Talking about the regulations, as we discussed, farmers must sell the entire produced to the CBN. Government fixes the procurement prices and strict monitoring to prevent diversion of illegal channels. So I think this is pretty much self-explanatory in nature, that the reason why we have so many stages where all of these things happen with respect to this production is to ultimately ensure that we are preventing the diversion of this particular cultivation towards illegal channels, right? So that is also very important. So in the end, let's solve one prelims question and then we will end this video. So with reference to the opium cultivation in India, consider the following statements. India is the only country authorized by the United Nations to produce gum opium. Opium cultivation in India is permitted only in the states of Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. Farmers are free to sell their opium production in open market after meeting the government quota. Which of the statements are correct? Please use the comment section, leave your answers below. Anyway, that's all for this particular video. I hope you have liked the video, you have understood what the topic is. Anyway, we'll meet once again with another video with an interesting topic. Until then, stay tuned. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.